last September, when I was blessed to sit with Pope Francis, it was a really interesting experience, to say the least. I literally got to sit by him side by side, and we addressed an audience of about 400 politicians, celebrities, New York City activists. And then there was a global audience of, I don't know how many millions of people that were watching as well. And for me, the experience, other than being quite intimidating, was something that was really remarkable, to say the least. And about a week later, I was at Case Western University in Ohio. There's a young woman who asked me, what was it like to meet the Pope? And what was really interesting, the question I got asked most often was, what did he smell like? I appreciate that. I said to her, this was a man who people lined up for hours just to watch his car drive by. And people who had a deep relationship with their Catholicism, people who had a tangential relationship with their Catholicism, people who had no relationship to Catholicism at all, people like myself who weren't Catholic, just many felt so moved by his message. And it said the night before he and I spoke together at the Ground Zero site, he had delivered a message at a very large cathedral in New York City called St. Patrick's Cathedral. And all of his messages had been scripted up until that point. There's probably 3,000 people who filled St. Patrick's to its capacity, and again, so many more watching on live television. And that night, Pope Francis decided to go off script, and he started his remarks by first praying for 700 Muslims who had died on the Hajj pilgrimage in Mecca that day. And I said to her, why do you think he would do that? He's in a city where the September 11th attacks took place. The relationship with law enforcement and Muslim community, as well as many other minority communities, communities of color, is tenuous at best. Mosques aren't so easily built here. If he hadn't said anything, nobody would have faulted him for it. They would have said, can't believe you didn't pray for the Muslims. I said he simply did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. This is a man who chose to eat with the homeless rather than politicians, a man whose Vatican recognized the state of Palestine, a man who asked his global constituency to take in refugees before anybody was even talking about it. And I think it's an important starting point for our conversation, because when you try to understand really what it is that motivates an individual like that, he's not 33 years old like me. He was close to 80 years old, and sitting next to him, trying to figure out where he just drew his sense of selflessness from. That his giving wasn't in such a way that he gave only to people like him, but he made up a very unique demographic of, unfortunately, few individuals who just give because they have the ability to give. Recognizing both their power and privilege and their ability to impact the masses. And when we juxtapose that to some of the realities that we're bombarded with day in and day out, anytime we turn on the news, we open up social media, we look at a newspaper, so much is divisive and segmenting, rather than based off of ideas of bringing together. Our engagement of diverse societies, unfortunately, is heavily impacted by imagery that we are consistently bombarded with, by a media machine that seeks to self-interest, to seek to serve interest of no one other than itself. We shape our understandings of the other not from actually engaging the other, but really engaging extreme voices that tell us to be away from each other rather than being together. And this is a problem, to say the least. Many of you fasted today. And the point of fasting is not just about feeling hunger in your stomach. It's not about feeling thirst in your throat alone. When we fast our ritual fast, it's a month of fasting. And for me, I think when I really felt the impact of fasting was probably when I was around 10 or 11 years old. I didn't really understand it up until that point. Just saw my family eating a lot more dates all the time. My dad would eat these dates, he'd cut them up and throw them in his cornflakes, and he'd be like, "You eat some dates too? Does your dad eat them in cornflakes also?" No. And he'd say to me, "Why don't you eat them? They taste really good." And they look like little cockroaches to me. When I started fasting regularly, and I hadn't eaten anything all day, I hadn't drank anything all day, nothing tasted sweeter than that date that I ate. The water that I drank was more refreshing than any water I'd ever drank before. And as it got past just the simple physical aspects of it, and created an opportunity that allowed for me to understand that real fullness was not about having the fullness of your stomach, but real fullness was about having the fullness of your heart. Whereas in society, so much of our coming together is about unity equated to uniformity that is of the external. That says you can only sit with people who look like you, who dress like you, who believe what it is that you believe in. Think about the dinners you had at your family tables. How often was the face sitting across from your face a face that was a different shade of skin color than your own? That was part of an individual who came from a different social class, different cultural heritage or country of origin, that allowed for a connectivity that understood that uniformity was not about from the external, but a uniformity that was internal. And the practice of fasting has the potential, as the Quran says, to give you that sense of mindfulness, that consciousness, the ability to focus so that you are not distracted by the day-to-day distractions that so many of us are. And when we get distracted, it yields some of the unfortunate realities that we find in the world today. Oppression, injustice, inequity. We walk by people every day and elevate ourselves by denigrating them. And I would say that the starting point is not thinking about what can I do to change the world around me alone, but what do I do to change the world that's inside of me? We don't talk about our hearts a lot. I work at a university. You all are at a university. You learn how to be a business person, an entrepreneur, an accountant, how to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, an academic, an artist, a community organizer, a teacher, whatever. But whoever sits down with you and asks you, why do you love what you love? Or why do you hate what you hate? Why do you desire what you desire? Our organs of sensory perception, they're not limited to the eyes that we see with, or the hands that we touch with, the tongues that we taste with, the minds that we think with, the ears that we hear with. But our ability to synthesize and process all of those things really is heavily dictated and governed by something that is not tangible but intangible, and it's inside of us. And day in and day out, where most of our decisions are motivated purely by filling our stomachs, the acquisition of wealth, money, food, sex, it's what drives us. We don't necessarily think about other parts of ourselves. And then we're not necessarily thinking about those same parts in somebody else. You see what I'm saying? I'll give you an example. I went to MIT and I was giving a lecture there. It was like 600, 700 people in the audience. When I finished, a lot of them kept coming up to me saying that you were really great, that was amazing, and my head just got really juiced up. And then this young woman came up to me and she said, my sister's a big fan of yours. Is it okay if I introduce her to you? I said, yeah, sure. When she brought her up to me, it was really easy to see that this young woman was blind. She couldn't see. And so we're talking, we're going back and forth. And when we're wrapping up our conversation, she says to me, I thought you'd be taller. I said, what? This woman's blind. She said, your voice is not coming from up here, it's coming from down here. And there was a kid from NYU who drove down with me. It was like, wow, subhanAllah, that's so amazing. She could tell how short you are. She can't even see. And I was like, oh yeah, that's so great. And inside, I'm thinking to myself, how short am I? A blind woman just told me. She didn't need eyes to see. You understand? And we get wrapped up in certain things sometimes. They keep us from actually seeing realities for what they are. We get content with just the bare minimum because we're not really thinking about why what we see is seen the way that we see it. And somebody else can look at something that we're looking at and see it totally different. We're not in a place where we start to think about the importance of coming together for our own sake, let alone someone else's sake, to be able to tap into the perspectives of those that are different from us so that we can enhance our own ability to now understand something that we've engaged from so many years of our lives in a different way because we've benefited from somebody else's experiences and narratives. We pass by people all the time. We pass by beauty all the time. We become so fixated to things that seek to serve our wants at the expense of our real needs. And when there's opportunity for us to grow, we size up based off of intellectual laziness, no mindfulness, no focus whatsoever. Because we're being drawn towards things that give us complacency rather than contentment. The Washington Post ran a social experiment a few years ago with a man by the name of Joshua Bell. Joshua Bell was put on the subway platform of the DC Metro subway line during rush hour. He opened up a violin case and started playing a violin, and maybe about 1,000, 1,100 people walked by him in 45 minutes. Joshua Bell says that in that 45 minutes, a handful of people actually stopped to listen to him. He said one grown man, one adult stopped for a full 3 minutes and heard him. Others just kept walking by. When children came past him, he said they would stare and gaze at him so hard. And the adults that were with them had to pull them away. And he said, I could see them staring at me over their shoulders until they couldn't see me anymore. He said in that 45 minutes, he made probably about $30 or $40. What's crazy about this is that Joshua Bell is one of the foremost practitioners of the violin in the world. The violin that he played that day itself cost about $3.5 million. He sold out concert hall after concert hall in the weeks before that day, where the starting ticket price was $100. And these people had a free concert to watch this man experience something in such a unique way, a story that years later they would definitely tell their children. But one by one, they all missed it because something else was important. Or they didn't recognize the importance of what was actually in front of them because they were prioritizing something that made no sense. What drives you? What motivates you? Why are you pushed in the way that you're pushed? When you see somebody who doesn't look like you, what do you think? When you see somebody whose skin color is not the same as yours, what do you think? When you see the hostility, when you see the violence, when you see the anger, the bigotry, the hatred, what do you think? And how do you understand and assess your role, especially being in a university? Think right now where you're at, because you know as well as I do, when you leave from here, the diversity that's at your tables right now is not going to probably be what you find in your social circles when you leave. Most of you will be sitting with people who look just like you, who have as much wealth as you, who come from the same backgrounds as you. And your engagement and experience of the other is going to heavily be shaped by perspectives and perceptions that are preconceived, not from real interaction. It's a challenge because the gaps will then be filled by those who don't really have any of our best interests in mind, who will leverage and capitalize our being away from each other to their advantage and to our disadvantage. There's a lot of inequity in this country. There's a lot of inequity in the world. We're in a place where the realities that we find today are not things that are new, unfortunately. You have seen systemic oppression, structural racism, heavy inequity against minorities. There's realities as to why we are still in the unfortunate space of trying to figure out, why do Black lives matter? Or do they even matter in this country? We are in a place where we become so myopic to our perspectives, where our inability to actually truly understand the experience of the other, because the only way that we can understand it is by putting it into a perspective of something that we have gone through. Saying that I know what it's like to be you because this happened to me. I'm going to say to you, speaking from my heart to your heart, some of us have not gone through what the rest of us have gone through. Some of us have no idea what it's like to be like some of the others who are in this room. When we believe that we do, in my opinion, we take away from our full capacity of being able to be as present as possible and being a part of a solution. And it makes it that much easier for us to justify our passivity and indifference as we watch injustice taking place in front of us. Microaggressions and racisms, whether they're conscious or unconscious, are abundantly around us. And you want to understand the distinction between day-to-day interactions that take place on the street and institutionalized policy that infringes upon the rights of minorities. I took about 20 of my students to eat at a street cart in New York City. I don't know if you all have street carts here in Colonial Williamsburg. We're standing in the street cart on 6th Avenue in Manhattan in the West Village. While we're waiting for our food to come, middle-aged Caucasian woman standing behind us, pushing her way through our group, saying, "Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. Can't you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying excuse me." And when she gets to the front, she looks at me face to face, and she says, "Oh, I guess you can't understand what I'm saying. How do they say excuse me where you come from?" I said, "We say excuse me." And she said, "No, the place where your family is from, how do they say excuse me there?" And I said, "We're from Jersey, and we say excuse me." She couldn't understand how somebody that looks like me is actually from this place. And that in and of itself is quite problematic, don't get me wrong. But when that mindset now finds its presence at a table that is dictating policy that impacts the lives of many, inclusive of those who are not present to speak on their behalf, when that mindset that is based off of stereotypes, preconceived ideas and notions, microaggressions, hate, bigotry, racism, is sitting at a table and it is deciding how we will be living our lives when we have no input into it. You see the establishment of inequity. You see the establishment of things that are unjust. I work as a chaplain for the New York City Police Department. By rank, I'm an inspector. It's a really high rank. It's one rank below a one-star chief. One of the things that we do as police chaplains every year is go down to the Ground Zero Memorial site on September 11th. We start out by having breakfast in police headquarters with families who lost loved ones on that day. We get in a bus and we go down to the memorial and participate in the ceremony. The 9th anniversary of the attacks, Vice President Biden was there. And the way that the ceremony was structured was a little bit different because the current memorial was still being constructed. For those of you who've ever seen it, it's this very large, beautiful kind of water pools that commemorate the lives of all that lost on that day. And so while that was being built, they made it a little bit more closed off. You had the stage where the ceremony took place, and in front of the stage was a VIP area for city officials, family members, and others. Behind us was a press pit for the media to watch from, and behind them, a place for the public to come and view if they wanted to. So I'm in my police uniform, an inspector's uniform, and we're waiting for the service to start. While I'm talking to people, I have my beard, I'm wearing my skull cap. 3 men approach me wearing suits, and they say Secret Service has spotted you from the top of the building, and they want us to check your credentials just in case. I said, just in case what? They said, we're sorry that we're doing this to you. I said, then why are you doing it? You got to understand, what they're questioning in that moment is not merely my physical presence at that location. I was an undergrad at New York University on September 11th in 2001. I stood with about 12,000 of my classmates in the middle of our campus in a park called Washington Square Park as we watched the second plane fly into the towers. As a Muslim student, where we had no Islamic center, no chaplaincy, nothing, students, we had microphones from media all over the world asking us, what do Muslims think right now? Because we're the closest Muslim group to the Ground Zero site. I stood at numerous funerals for people of my faith and other walks of life that we lost on that day. So much of the work that I do today is informed by the atrocities of that day. And those men in that moment are questioning the validity of all of it. The frustrating thing isn't that I'm going through it, but what can I really do about it? If I was to say anything in response, it would probably make the situation that much worse for me. So where I couldn't speak, and there was others that were watching, but chose not to speak, a Latina woman standing next to me spoke. And she said that what you are doing right now is more dishonoring to the memory of our loved ones that we lost on that day than anything else. She had lost her son on September 11th. She said, here this young man is standing with us in our moment of need, and you are making it seem as if he's doing something wrong just because he's Muslim. And as quickly as they had taken that validation away, she brought it right back. I want you to understand this story in a couple of frames. One, somebody sitting somewhere made a decision that trickled down to these men that if you see somebody who looks like this, look at him again. That's not okay. I'm in an inspector's uniform, man. And even if I wasn't, it would still not be okay. I get detained going onto planes domestically, coming off of planes internationally for 4 to 6 hours at a time. Whether I'm traveling on behalf of the university I work at, whether I'm going to speak at a conference, whether I'm traveling on behalf of our country, the State Department. When I've been stopped consistently, and you see frustration on some, not all of the people who are stopping me, because they find, as they go through all of my belongings, my police credentials, my State Department credentials, and they say, why are we stopping you? And I say, if you don't know, how am I supposed to know? And when it happened 3 weekends in a row, and I said, why do you think you're stopping me? Because the same guys kept interviewing me. One of them said, look, man, you're young and you're male and you're Muslim. Those things don't go so well together right now. The FBI has visited me in my home multiple times. I, who sat right next to Pope Francis and hugged him so many times, people want to know what he smelled like for me. I, who sat next to President Obama, and the only person between he and I was Suzanne Barakat, whose brother Dia and sister-in-laws, you saw what happened to them. When the FBI came and they talked, and I said, what do you really want from me? They said, you're too good to be true. We're waiting for you to do something. Just know that we're watching you. And if you do something, we're coming. That's not the same necessarily as you're on the street and somebody said something terrible to you. But that reality that exists on the street, when we let it go unchecked, plays a role in that policy being able to be built. Second thing that I would tell you is, despite all of that, if anybody said to me, would you do it all over again? I would say definitely. Because if my presence, being the only one of my community standing in a certain space, will bring understanding, will bring consciousness, will bring awareness, will make it easier for people who come after me, then I'm going to keep doing it. For certain battles to be won, those battles have to take place in the first place. You might be the only person who speaks a certain way. You might be the only person who stands while everyone else is sitting. But you have to do it because it's the right thing to do. And lastly, when you think about a good person, somebody who gets it, you gotta think about that woman who understood that in that situation, only she could say what she said. Only she could speak in the way that she spoke. It's me, the Secret Service, thousands of eyes around us. Who's going to say to a mother who lost her son on September 11th at the Ground Zero site anything? She understood her power. She understood her privilege in that moment. And she utilized it for somebody who was underprivileged and underserved. You embody that. That's what Pope Francis does. You embody that. That's what good people do. Diversity in and of itself is not an achievement. You can sit around with people who look differently from you, believe differently from you, anything and everything is different from you. But that woman embodies true pluralism. She knows how to celebrate and appreciate diversity. She understands that the pinnacle of our society will not ever be reached as long as the underserved and underprivileged are mistreated and abused. You want to think not about what's going on in the heart of somebody who can run for president of the United States on campaigns of bigotry and hatred. Somebody who can get the masses to rally behind them. Not because it's a joke, but because they are really hateful and racist. They are building off of a deeply embedded and entrenched mindset that exists in this country that believes that it's a space only for a select few and not for most of us who are sitting in this room. I'm not saying think about what's going on in their hearts. I'm saying think about your own heart. What it would take, what you would need to experience in order to just say something and do something simply because it's the right thing to do. We put conditions and qualifications on our giving. We only interact and socialize with those who we find a certain familiarity with. And our mindset becomes something that is heavily dictated by perspectives that have nothing to do with the other that we're engaging, but they're really just our perceptions of them that we're engaging. We live in a really strange time where the world is getting smaller. You and I can think something about an entire demographic, about an entire group, majority or minority, without ever having met them before. You know, 12 years old when I was in Williamsburg, all these people dressed like, they're from the colonial period of America. It's interesting in and of itself. And we were in a room just like this, like our whole class. I'm standing in the corner, talking to my friends. It's really an old woman wearing a bonnet and some kind of frock grabbed me and started doing I don't know what kind of colonial pilgrim dance with me. It literally looked like this room. So this is really weird for me right now. a title of university chaplain with me at NYU. He's a rabbi. His name is Yehuda Sarna. And afterwards, there's a young man named Faris who reached out to me and he said, "Can we have dinner together?" So we went, we ate, and we had some conversations, and he told me about himself and what he was doing and how he wanted to build a community center, and he talked to me about his family. Faris, as we were talking, he and I and Yehuda and a couple of other people, I said to him, can we go and see your family? And we did at around 1 o'clock in the morning, and he took me here. And we went to the graves of Dia, Yusuf, and Rozan, who are the 3 winners that were coming to support the endowment that's in their name tonight. So I'm standing there with Faris, and one of Faris's friends, and Rabbi Yehuda Sarna. We're in a Muslim cemetery. It's very overwhelming, to say the least. I'm doing a short prayer and I'm crying. I'm trying to understand inside of me, how does hate like this exist? And how do we allow for it to exist? What is it that would compel somebody to really be in this way? And so while we're standing and we're trying to figure this out, I'm crying, positioned in front of these graves. And Faris is behind me. I didn't know he was taking these pictures, and he started to cry. So Yehuda was an Orthodox Jewish rabbi. Walks over to Faris, puts his arm around him, and he consoles him and offers him solace during his time of grief. I want you to understand that. Because Yehuda's presence there didn't necessitate him having to become one of us. When we were at Duke, to give you perspective, he flew on an earlier flight that was supposed to leave at 8:30 in the morning, and I got on a flight that was supposed to be at 11, and it was really bad weather, so his flight got delayed, and mine got delayed a little bit. I ended up landing in North Carolina at around 1:45, and his flight didn't take off till 4:45. He landed, he came straight from the airport 10 minutes into our program at Duke. And when we were done, he hadn't eaten anything. He was just in this airport, and for a good chunk of it, he was on the airplane, just sitting on the runway. I said, "Hey man, I might go to this cemetery. Do you want to come?" Without hesitation, he said yes. When I prayed, he didn't pray with me. When I stood, he didn't have to do what I was doing. But he was able to be himself and still be there for Faris. That's the kind of unity that I'm talking about. That has a uniformity of your hearts. That helps us to understand how we can be present for one another while still being true to ourselves and giving the best that we have of ourselves to each other. And so what Faris' response was to this hate, he's creating something called the lighthouse. Not a lighthouse like one word, but his brother Dia, his name means light. So a house that's of light. His response to the hatred and the bigotry that his family has endured is to meet it with love and hope, and to build something that would be of benefit to the people who are in that community. You all have so much that you can do together. Something that necessitates not being together just for a moment, but recognizing and understanding how this moment today is going to shape moments that come beyond this. The starting point that I would tell you is really look inside and dig deep and try to understand why it is that you see the world in the way that you see it, but why do you also not see certain things that are just around you? Why do you overlook certain people? Why do you not engage certain individuals? Why is it so easy to just walk by? I live in an NYU building at our university. And I walked in one night and there was a security guard sitting at the front desk, and I said to him, "How are you? How's your day going?" He said, "Good, thanks." And then when I got to the elevator, he said to me, "Imam, I need to tell you something." And his voice was kind of stern. So I turned around and walked near him, and I'm facing his profile, and he's staring towards the doorway. And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "I've worked at this university for years. And every day, hundreds of people walk past me. He said, you're the only one who says hello to me and asks me how I'm doing." He said, "I want to say thank you to you for that." I don't feel bad for him. I feel bad for each person who's walked past him and not got to hear the amazing stories that he shares with me about how proud he is that his grandkids are going to school, about the different things that he's seen as he's lived all over the world, that in his decades of living, what he's actually experienced and his perspectives. I feel bad for every person who can't look past his accent, can't look past his skin color, can't look past his uniform, and only sees him as a fixture. Somebody set this room up for you. Somebody put out the chairs, somebody put out the tables. When we're all gone, somebody's going to clean it. There's people day to day who are beyond just their job functions, they're beyond just the boxes that we put them in. They have a lot going on that we can take from you. When we fail to understand and bring people who are different from us into our lives, it's not just they who will miss out from the blessings we can offer to them, but we miss out from being able to gain from their experiences and their perspectives. In the Indian subcontinent, there was a well-known figure by the name of Allama Iqbal. Iqbal had written so many books, he had so many degrees, he could speak a ton of languages, he got so many awards and accolades. He gets to a point where they want to actually bestow knighthood upon him. And he says, if you are going to give me knighthood, I need for you to also give it to my Quran teacher from when I was a child. And the British say to him that we have no idea who your teacher is. Can you tell us a little bit about him? What has he done with his life? Has he written anything? What are his books? And Iqbal says, I am his book. There are parts to the chapters of your narrative that are being written not with the absence of individuals, but a presence that is grossly misrepresenting them. There are individuals who can be in your pages that would bring to you so much benefit and so much perspective that it takes a different kind of courage to go and be with somebody else rather than waiting for them to come and be with you. There's so many gains that we could have without losing out on the opportunity for a lot of fun and a lot of excitement. But the connectivity that you will feel with one another when you go and you grow and you build, when you stand and you understand, will give you a contentment unlike anything else. If you have the ability to impact even one heart, then don't hesitate on that. You don't know where that heart can end up and what kind of things it can do. So a story that I'll end with is one that I was was taught when I was younger that many of you have probably heard. It involves a young man who is a known author in his community. And he would gain inspiration for his writings by going out and being in nature. So one day he is walking down the shore of a sea and he sees a figure in the distance that looks like it's dancing and intrigues him. And as he gets closer, he sees that it's not dancing, but it seemingly is picking up something off of the ground and throwing it into the water. When he gets even closer, he sees that it's a young boy, and washed up upon the shore are thousands and thousands of fish. And he's throwing them into the sea. So when he gets close enough to engage him in conversation, he says to the boy, "What are you doing?" And the boy says to him, "I'm throwing the fish back into the water." And he says, "Why are you doing that?" And the boy says that they have washed up with a tide, and if I don't, they will lose all of their water, they'll dehydrate, and they will surely die. And the man, he looks up and down the coast. All he sees is fish upon fish. He looks to the boy and he says, "There's so many of them. There is no way you will be able to get all of them back into that water. What is the point of what you are doing? What difference will it make?" The young boy, he looks at the man. He looks down at the ground. He picks up one of the fish. He throws it into the water. He said it made a difference to that one. You can impact even one life. You can impact even one heart. You can do right just because it's the right thing to do by one individual. Don't keep yourself from it. We have so many right now in this world who are the continued catalyst for feelings of dread by people of all walks of life. You and I have to be a continued source of hope for people. We have to take a little bit of what it is that we do day to day and understand how our existence, how our living, how our being is not just for our sakes, but it's for the sakes of those who are around us. You really think about it. We have a lot more at times than we really need. If you tasted the beauty of real fasting today, not just one that was about empty stomachs, but one that was about full hearts. If you felt a certain experience by being in a room like this, it's beautiful where I'm standing. I see everything and everyone so different from each other. Most of you don't look like each other. You're young, you're old, you're male, you're female, you're every skin color. You got to take this and take it out there. When there are those who are out there who say that this is the problem, you can't let that just go and think it's not going to be an issue. But that much harder make this a reality. Let them know that this is what we want our societies to look like. If I can ever be helpful to you in anything, please don't hesitate in reaching out. I don't know the next time I'm coming back to Williamsburg, but if I ever make it out here, I'll definitely let you know. If you're ever in New York City, please do hit me up. Be happy to show you around, help in whatever way I can. Get a parking ticket, probably get you out of it. This is the only time that we're all meant to be together. And I pray, inshallah ta'ala, God willing, that we're all together in the best of places in the world beyond this one. If I keep you all in my thoughts, please do the same. And if there's a means and mechanisms by which we might be able to be of benefit to one another, please don't hesitate in reaching out. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.